Tonight, leaving the door open for a potential pipeline on the West Coast. BC's Premier eyeing creative solutions.
Trying to find a path forward, trying to de-escalate tensions with our neighbors.
What David Eby is putting on the table to open conversations. Also working to identify a soldier killed more than a century ago.
Casualty identification is a commitment, both to the Canadian Armed Forces, to the families of the missing, and to the dead themselves.
How the public could help solve this wartime mystery. And running into the history books.
My colleagues are very impressed by myself, and they think I'm very crazy.
How a Quebecer hit the grand slam of ultra marathons to accomplish a Canadian first.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. BC's Premier says he isn't ruling out the plan to build a new pipeline across his province after Ottawa and Alberta came to an agreement. It has seen plenty of opposition, with First Nations communities standing their ground. But David Eby says there may be a way to move the conversation forward. CTV's John Venevalley-Rao starts us off.
Just days ago, BC's Premier stepped up to a microphone and suggested the pipeline agreement he was left out of was never going to amount to anything.
No proponent, no route, no money, no First Nation support.
But on CTV's question period, David Eby now says he is open to discussing a pipeline project running through his province if there are no changes to the federal tanker ban.
If we can agree that the oil tanker ban is going to stay in place, then let's have those conversations. I think that would make life a lot better and easier in British Columbia in terms of our relationship with coastal First Nations. Would definitely take down the temperature.
Put in place 6 years ago, the ban prohibits larger tankers from docking at ports along BC's north coast if they're carrying lots of crude or certain types of oil. It's in place to protect some delicate ecosystems. Eby says an exemption would anger First Nations groups and put existing energy projects in jeopardy, and suggested another option, increasing capacity of the existing Trans Mountain pipeline.
Trying to find a path forward, trying to de-escalate tensions with our neighbors, trying to understand their concerns, what they would like to do, and I really hope they do the same for us.
The Memorandum of Understanding, signed this week with Alberta, has already cost the Prime Minister a cabinet minister and longtime environmentalist. And Alberta Premier Danielle Smith was booed by grassroots members when she said this at her party's annual general meeting.
I hope people today feel a lot more confident than Canada Works than they did a couple of days ago.
As for BC's Premier, he had vehemently opposed a new bitumen pipeline, and some noting a change in tone.
Eby is not slamming the door. He's not having a fit. He wants some of the projects of his own that involve fossil fuels, especially liquefied natural gas, to go through. And he mentions tens of billions of dollars of current projects and tens of billions more.
Meanwhile, Eby has said he'd also like to explore things like boosting the country's capacity to refine petroleum as opposed to buying gas from the U.S. Heather.
Thanks, John. CTV's John Venevalley-Rao in Toronto. There is a growing call tonight for Canada to reverse its planned cuts to foreign aid, a call echoed by a former Minister of Foreign Affairs who says the reduction in funding is moving this country away from some core principles.
It's because we thought the best way of providing security for Canada is to make sure that the rest of the world has more stability, more equality, ability to fight climate, to support health. These are all issues that I think we're now basically abandoning.
Lloyd Axworthy's comments come as the head of the United Nations HIV and AIDS program urges Mark Carney to reverse those planned cuts. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand has said Canada's pledge to the Global Fund remains, quote, meaningful despite the reduction. A massive storm system led to a weekend of travel chaos across a huge swath of the U.S. Scary moments in Des Moines, Iowa, where a plane skidded off an icy runway moments after landing. In Chicago, more than 20 centimeters of snow fell on O'Hare Airport, setting a record and causing major delays. The system had people digging out across the Midwest, with some areas getting nearly 40 centimeters of snow. Winter weather also causing problems in Ontario as people around Toronto woke up to some dense but short-lived snow. Just a few centimeters of snow around the Greater Toronto area Sunday morning, but that snow transitioned to rain, making for some slick and slippery conditions. Environment Canada also issued an advisory about strong winds whipping through the region. As winter weather settles in, it's a sure sign cold and flu season has arrived. You likely know someone who is sick at the moment, with a lot of illness spreading across many parts of the country. Hospital staff are bracing for an intense influenza season. CTV's Paul Hollingsworth tells us why and how best to protect yourself.
It's cold and flu season, which is why Chris Butler recently decided to be proactive and get her shots before the winter weather sets in.
But I'm still doing the wash my hands and that kind of thing. And I don't like to go to any event if it's really crowded.
New data from Health Canada shows flu cases jumped to more than 2,100 last week, up from close to 1,400 the previous week. The population most affected by the flu are people 65 and older. That's why Bill Van Gorder is urging his fellow seniors to wear a mask and be up to date with vaccinations.
Your flu shot, your COVID shot, your RSV shot. Remember, if you get one of those other respiratory diseases, the chances of you also picking up the flu are very strong.
Some children's hospitals across the country have implemented mask mandates and have added extra healthcare staff, expecting an influx of flu patients this season. Infectious disease specialist Dr. Lisa Barrett says there are concerns this year's flu vaccine is not a perfect match for the strains spreading in Canada.
It still does prevent hospitalizations and ICU admissions in many people. And also, there are other strains that are well matched still, that might not be as common, but are still floating around. And this vaccine will still protect you against those.
According to Dr. Barrett, there are also fears this version of the flu virus could bring a lot of sickness.
We do know from the rest of the world that we're starting to see influenza go up, and it's been a crappy influenza season in other parts of the world, so likely it's going to be a tough one here too.
Dr. Lisa Barrett says sometimes people think they have a cold when actually it's the flu, which can lead to severe symptoms and sometimes other complications. Paul Hollingsworth, CTV News, Halifax.
Influenza season coincides with the holidays, a very busy time of year for Canadians and Canadian businesses. Stores and restaurants often look to boost staffing levels, but just how easy is it to find a job this year? We sent Sarah Plowman to find out.
At malls across Canada, people are hunting for a deal and some a job. Jaden Flexman landed her holiday gig at Hickory Farms, where she'll sell gourmet meats and cheeses into January.
It was a lot of applying online. There was about 200 online applications I'd done, if not more.
According to the job search site Indeed.com, holiday hiring is up 12% compared to last year, but companies aren't posting as many positions as they did 2 or 3 years ago.
There are going to be a few more options potentially out there. At the same time, job seekers are potentially competing with more of their peers.
Bernard says it's been a tough market for job seekers the past few years. Canada's unemployment rate is about 7%. The youth unemployment rate is double that.
To really get the labor market moving in the right direction, we just need a stronger overall economy.
To help keep up with holiday demand, Endeavours and ThinkPlay in Fredericton posted one seasonal job. More than 180 applied.
We have combed through all of those resumes.
People with retail experience, but surprisingly, a lot of nurses too.
A lot of the applicants I noticed, there were multiple current positions and they're looking for a second, a third.
In Brandon, Manitoba, Toy Masters brought on new staff, including students, but had to turn dozens of people away.
It really breaks my heart to see how hard it is for a lot of these young adults and kids to be finding jobs these days.
Come January, Flexman will have another job. She has advice for anyone searching.
Just keep in mind budgeting, and paper resumes do still work sometimes, so don't give up on those.
Tips to digest when there's no avoiding a challenge. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Fredericton.
Hundreds of people remain out of their homes tonight, 4 days after a fire erupted in a Toronto apartment complex. Fire crews are still battling flames smoldering inside the walls of the high-rise buildings in the city's East End. Reports suggest they are slowly making progress. The fire broke out on Thursday, forcing the evacuation of more than 400 units. Mourners gathered in Vancouver to honor the lives lost in an apartment complex fire in Hong Kong. A large crowd formed this evening, holding a moment of silence, many placing flowers at a small memorial on the steps of the Vancouver Art Gallery to show solidarity with the victims.
A lot of us in the community are grieving over the fire. We have friends, family, acquaintances, people we know who are affected by the fire, and we just want to get together to remember them and hold space.
The death toll from the blaze, which broke out on Wednesday, has reached at least 146. U.S. and Ukrainian officials wrapped roughly 4 hours of peace talks in Florida, with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio telling reporters the session was productive, but there's still a lot of work to do.
We continue to be realistic about how difficult this is, but optimistic, particularly given the fact that as we've made progress, I think there is a shared vision here that this is not just about ending the war, which is very important. It is about securing Ukraine's future.
The two teams tried to refine the proposed framework put forward by U.S. President Donald Trump. This comes as at least 6 people were killed and dozens wounded across Ukraine from weekend attacks by Russian forces. 3 children and 1 adult were killed in a mass shooting at a child's birthday party in Stockton, California, Saturday night. 11 others were also wounded in the attack. No arrests have been made. A silent disease that often goes unnoticed until the damage is done. New data reveals chronic kidney disease is claiming more Canadian lives than ever before. Here's CTV's Kathy Lee on the national push to put this health crisis front and center.
Cellcept and tacrolimus.
All of this is the armor that makes every day possible for Sean Delaney.
When you have a transplant, you need to look after it by suppressing your immune system.
The 54-year-old's battle with chronic kidney disease began before he could walk.
I had a urinary tract blockage when I was a month old, so I lost my left kidney by Christmas.
His only kidney carried him until 27. Then it failed. 2 transplants would follow, the first from his younger brother Peter, the second 2 decades later from Brenda, a friend of a friend.
There's lots of things I couldn't have done without my brother's kidney, and I couldn't have done this without her kidney.
New data shows 1 in 10 Canadians now live with chronic kidney disease. And even after adjusting for population growth and aging, the national death rate has soared more than 70% since 1990, markedly higher than the global average.
We're not detecting them in time. We're not deploying the treatments that we know reduce mortality, prevent progressive kidney function loss, and other adverse outcomes.
Now, a call for a national framework to enhance kidney health surveillance, ensure equitable access to care, and coordinate early detection.
The most important way of doing that is really to have a blood test and a urine test, 2 very simple tests that you can request from your doctor. Most people don't develop symptoms of chronic kidney disease until they're very late in the disease trajectory.
You're good.
For Delaney, the fatigue, the nausea, the waiting are finally behind him. What remains is gratitude and a life he refuses to take for granted.
Tomorrow's not promised. And so I am taking every chance and every opportunity.
And every moment doing the things he loves outdoors with the people who fuel his fight.
I get to spend time with my grandsons now. My oldest grandson's now 7. We hit 4 mountain summits last year together.
And Delaney says there are many more summits still to climb. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Calgary.
Coming up, more than just a light show.
We get a lot more data, and it's also in generally a bit more interesting.
Why Canadian scientists are hoping to use the northern lights to help predict the weather in space. We've been treated to some incredible celestial light shows this month, thanks to solar storms in the upper atmosphere. And researchers in Saskatchewan have those storms under close observation. CTV's Alison Bamford on what they hope to find.
On nights with major solar storms, Matt Melnick's view looks like this. From 39,000 feet in the air, he sees the result of particles from the sun crashing into Earth's atmosphere.
They just look so much more defined and bright. You can pick out and see all the movements and all the pillars and everything. It's quite amazing.
Stunning spectacles of northern lights are growing more frequent as the sun reaches its peak of an 11-year solar cycle. An exciting time for aurora chasers and researchers.
We get a lot more data, and it's also in generally a bit more interesting.
Daniel Billett is an assistant director with Superdarn Canada, a group that keeps tabs on the weather in space and studies the impacts of it here on Earth.
We're literally measuring the motion of the upper atmosphere.
Billett's work largely focuses on how solar wind affects low-orbit satellites.
Orbits can change a little bit, and that means they can come down. And if they're on unpredictable trajectories, that means there could be risk of collision.
Studies show solar storms can create powerful electric currents with potential to impact power grids, degrade pipelines, and interfere with navigation and communication signals.
We look at convection up in the ionosphere, and you can make the analogy that this is like high and low pressure systems, except for we're looking at electric potentials or electric voltages in high and low voltage systems.
Predicting the weather in space is much more difficult than forecasting it here on Earth, with less data and more variables at play. But researchers here say they hope more information can help change that. Alison Bamford, CTV News, Saskatoon.
For the second time this year, a major government report in Newfoundland and Labrador has been released with false sources, likely generated by AI. CTV's Garrett Barry now with the Premier's vow to tighten the rules.
When you hire professional organizations to prepare reports, then you don't expect to get this type of things happening in those reports.
Newfoundland and Labrador paid more than $1 million to consulting firm Deloitte for a massive 500-page report on healthcare staffing in the province. It's meant to guide the next 10 years of hiring, but the entire effort is now under fire because of false citations found in the footnotes of the document.
No matter what is said in the report, fact of the matter, we're not talking about what was in the report. We're talking about references.
The fake citations were first found by journalists at The Independent in Newfoundland and Labrador, an online publication. They published 3 separate examples of citations of journal papers that simply do not exist, including one purportedly examining the costs and benefits of recruiting healthcare workers locally instead of internationally. This is actually the second time that something like this has happened here. In September, a major report on education reform was also found to have false citations, though that one was internally developed. Premier Tony Wakeham says the province will now look to create regulations and guidelines on AI use. His office says its use inside the public service will be subject to strict review. Deloitte has acknowledged the errors in the document, but insists the recommendations inside the report are still valid.
But I'm already hearing from members saying, well, how do we know that? So the doubt has been cast.
The province's healthcare unions say the report's credibility is now undermined and are raising questions about the future use of consultants on more healthcare research. Garrett Barry, CTV News, St. John's.
Still ahead, solving a wartime mystery. How you could help historians identify a Canadian war hero. Researchers are on a quest to identify a Canadian soldier who served more than 100 years ago. But as CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver shows us, finding this unknown soldier's true identity comes with many challenges.
Nearly 110 years ago, a Canadian soldier was one of more than 2,200 other Canadians who died on the Western Front, fighting to capture Hill 70 in the German stronghold of Lens, France.
These are his collar badges, so his C-13 collar badges.
Now, historians are close to finally identifying the unknown soldier, whose remains were uncovered during construction in France almost 10 years ago.
Casualty identification is a commitment, both to the Canadian Armed Forces, to the families of the missing, and to the dead themselves.
The soldier was found with coins, nail clippers, a comb, and a shoe, but it's these collar badges that narrowed down the search. The man served with the 13th Battalion Royal Highlanders of Canada, and an analysis of his remains show he was in his early 20s when he died, and between 5'5" and 5'8½". Clues that helped Canada's casualty identification team come up with a short list that includes Private Patrick Kirk, who enlisted in 1914.
Private Kirk was originally from St. John's in Newfoundland. We know this from his attestation paper. And we know that he's working as a miner in Stellarton, Nova Scotia when the war broke out. With Private Kirk, however, there are a lot of unknowns.
One of those unknowns, his name, spelled Kirk, Quirk, and even Quick. That's why the team at National Defence is asking anyone who thinks the name sounds familiar to contact them. Without a relative's DNA sample, the wartime mystery can't be solved.
Private Kirk is on our short list of candidates. He's in the right place at the right time, or rather the wrong place at the wrong time, given this context. But what this means is, with this identification process, we really need a viable DNA donor.
The goal is to give this unknown soldier his name back so he can receive a full military funeral in front of his family and finally be buried with a tombstone bearing his name and regiment. Annie Bergeron-Oliver, CTV News, Ottawa.
Still ahead tonight, this Quebec runner's claim to fame marking a unique ultra-marathon success story. Finally for us tonight, an ER nurse who is going the extra mile to race her way into the history books. Not in hospital hallways, but on the open road, though passion and practice do go hand in hand. Sandra Lafontaine is the first Canadian woman to complete the Grand Slam of ultra marathons. CTV's Christine Long has her story.
4 huge ultra marathon events, hundreds of miles, all completed within 8 months. Sandra Lafontaine is the first Canadian and the first woman to complete what's known as the Grand Slam of ultramarathons. She says it was extraordinary.
C'était extraordinaire.
She's run 40 ultramarathons in the last 11 years, each one ranging from 57 to 500 kilometers. Lafontaine says it's more about endurance than speed.
D'adrénaline, d'énergie.
She says the runs prepare her for her 16-hour nursing shifts in the Sainte-Agathe-des-Monts Hospital's emergency department.
Ça aide pour les endorphines, ça calme le système.
Lafontaine says the endorphins she gets from the 20 hours of training a week in the Laurentians help her focus and concentrate on the job.
My colleagues are very impressed by myself, and they think I'm very crazy to do these big races. Yeah.
49 years old and injury-free, Lafontaine is already filling her 2026 calendar with more challenges.
In the dark, yeah.
In the mountains.
In the mountains, yeah. In the trail.
She says running ultramarathons is not a hobby, it's her way of life. Christine Long, CTV News, Sainte-Agathe-des-Monts.
An incredible accomplishment. That is our newscast for this Sunday night. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Omar and Sandy will be here tomorrow, and I'll see you again on Friday. Good night.